When a heartbroken single dad stumbles upon a lost little girl in the pouring rain, he thinks he's just doing the right thing by taking her to a shelter. But when the police show up with helicopters and suits, he finds out the girl he saved isn't just missing, she's the kidnapped daughter of a billionaire. And now, the whole world is watching him, wondering if he's a hero or something far worse. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? Jake stood in front of the open fridge, staring at the three things left inside: half a bottle of ketchup, a bruised apple, and one slice of stale white bread. The cold light cast shadows on the kitchen wall, catching the edge of the eviction notice pinned with a magnet. It had been there for 4 days now, taunting him. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Again. Lily was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a fleece blanket with cartoon ducks, one of the few things her mother had left behind when she vanished 2 years ago. He closed the fridge and leaned both hands on the counter, breathing through the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, the kind that felt like waiting for a bomb to go off. His phone buzzed. Another declined job application. That made 9 this week. He had a night shift lined up at the loading docks. Just one night, under-the-table pay, no benefits, no promises. But it would keep the lights on for another week. Maybe. In the other room, Lily coughed in her sleep. Jake straightened up. She'd been fighting off a cold for days, and he hadn't been able to afford the pink bottle of children's syrup at the pharmacy. The shame burned in his chest as he walked over and knelt beside her. Her forehead was damp. She stirred and blinked up at him. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby," he whispered, brushing the hair from her face. "Are we going to have dinner tonight?" He paused, just for a second. But that second felt like breaking. "Tomorrow. Daddy's got to go to work, remember? But tomorrow we'll get pancakes." She nodded, eyes already drifting closed again. Jake sat there beside her for a moment longer, watching her breathe. Then he stood, grabbed his coat, and quietly opened the front door. Outside, the sky was already black, and the wind bit through the holes in his shoes. He shoved his hands in his pockets and started walking. He didn't have bus fare, but the docks were only 6 miles away. He'd done worse for less. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that tonight everything would change. The knock came like a hammer. 3 sharp pounds against the door. Jake jolted awake, heart thudding, unsure if the sound was part of his dream or real. Then it came again, louder this time. Lily stirred on the couch, her small body curling tighter under the blanket. Jake pushed himself up from the floor where he'd dozed off beside her, bones aching from the hard surface. His eyes flicked to the clock on the microwave, 6:17 a.m., too early for visitors, too purposeful a knock for neighbors. He opened the door just a crack. A man in a windbreaker stood on the landing, holding a clipboard and a thick envelope. He didn't look up, didn't smile, just handed Jake the envelope with the kind of practiced indifference that only came from delivering bad news every day. "Final notice. You've got 5 days, then you're out." Jake opened his mouth to argue, to beg maybe, but the man had already turned and walked off down the stairs, his footsteps fading with the wind. Jake stared down at the envelope like it was radioactive. He closed the door, locked it, and leaned back against it. The paper trembled in his hands. Lily's soft breathing behind him felt like the only thing holding the room together. He opened the envelope with shaking fingers. "Final notice. Per your lease agreement, you are required to vacate the premises by—" His vision blurred. He stopped reading. They had no savings, no backup plan, no family to call. His last paycheck barely covered utilities and food, what little of it he could manage. Rent was a luxury. He'd been juggling bills like fire, and now everything was burning down. A quiet sniffle made him turn. Lily had woken up and was watching him from the couch, eyes wide and scared. She was only 6, but she knew too much already. Jake tried to smile, but it cracked at the corners. "Everything's okay, baby," he lied. She didn't respond, just looked at the envelope in his hand. Jake folded it and shoved it into the drawer under the sink with the others. Then he turned on the faucet, pretending to be busy, pretending to have control. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The rain came down in heavy sheets, the kind that soaked through clothes in seconds and turned every breath into a cloud of steam. Jake walked with his head low, hoodie pulled up, boots splashing through puddles as he made his way toward the docks. His coat was too thin, and the holes in his shoes were now little bathtubs sloshing with each step. But none of that mattered. What mattered was getting to the shift on time, 8 hours of lifting crates for just enough cash to keep Lily from sleeping in the car. He passed under a flickering streetlight, its buzz loud in the downpour. The air smelled like diesel and wet concrete. He was just rounding the corner near an abandoned gas station when he saw her. A little girl. She sat on the curb, knees pulled up to her chest, hair plastered to her cheeks, crying silently beneath the storm. No coat, no shoes, just a soaked dress that clung to her like paper. Jake stopped in his tracks. For a moment he thought maybe she was a hallucination, his mind finally cracking under pressure. But the sound of her shivering sobs cut through the static of the rain. He looked around. No one. No cars. No mother rushing out of a nearby house. No lost dog posters on the poles. Just this girl. Alone. Jake swallowed hard. He couldn't stop. He didn't have time. And strangers meant trouble. She could have been bait or a setup. The city was cruel like that. But she looked up at him, and her eyes, wide and terrified, pulled something raw out of him, something he thought had gone numb. "You okay?" he called out, approaching slowly, cautiously. She didn't answer, just hugged her knees tighter. Her lips were blue. "Where's your mom, sweetheart?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out, only a strangled breath. Jake knelt beside her, ignoring the cold water soaking his jeans. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "But you can't stay out here. You'll get sick. Come on, let's get you somewhere warm." She didn't move, but she didn't pull away either. That was enough. He took off his hoodie and wrapped it around her tiny shoulders, lifting her in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. As he carried her through the rain, his mind spun in circles. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why hadn't anyone come looking for her? He didn't know, but one thing was already certain. His night had just changed forever. Jake stood outside the shelter's glass doors, rain dripping from his hair, jacket clinging to his back like another layer of skin. The girl, barely more than a bundle of soaked limbs, was still in his arms, shivering against his chest. She hadn't spoken the whole walk over. Not a word, not a name, not even a sound beyond those first quiet sobs. The shelter looked closed. No cars in the lot. Lights dim. He hesitated. The sign above the door read, "Haven House, emergency housing for women and children." He didn't know if they'd even let him in. He didn't exactly fit the mold, but where else could he go with a lost child and no idea what the hell he was doing? He pressed the buzzer, static crackled through the intercom. Then a tired woman's voice answered, "We're closed to intake tonight. Try—" "She's alone," Jake said quickly, loud enough to be heard over the rain. "Little girl. Found her crying on the street. No coat. She hasn't said a word. She's freezing." There was a pause, then a click. The door buzzed open. Inside, the heat hit him like a wall. His boots squeaked on the linoleum floor. A woman in scrubs and tired eyes came around the corner, holding a towel and a clipboard. She froze when she saw them. Her expression shifted from suspicion to alarm. "Where did you find her?" she asked. "2 blocks over," Jake said, carefully setting the girl down on a bench. She was just sitting there, alone. The woman, her name tag read Carla, knelt beside the girl and wrapped the towel around her shoulders. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" The girl looked at her, lips parted, but said nothing. "She hasn't talked," Jake added. "I don't know if she can." Carla nodded and stood. "I'll call this in. She might be a runaway, or worse." Jake stiffened. "Worse?" Carla gave him a look. "We get trafficked kids through here sometimes. Some of them don't talk for days." Jake's stomach twisted. He looked down at the girl again. She was staring at the floor, her small fingers gripping the edges of the towel. Carla reached for the phone. "Stay here. Police will need a statement." Jake glanced at the clock on the wall. His shift was starting. Bills, rent, food, they all blurred in the back of his mind. But he didn't move. Something in his gut told him, whatever was happening now, it was bigger than missing work. It was bigger than rent. The girl sat on the edge of a plastic chair, Carla's towel still wrapped around her like armor. Her feet dangled above the tiled floor, toes curled and pale, marked with little cuts like she'd been running barefoot for miles. Her hair hung in damp strands across her face, and her arms were locked tight around her stomach. Jake sat across from her, hands resting on his knees, heart beating like a drum inside his chest. He'd tried everything, jokes, soft questions, even offered the peanut butter crackers he'd had in his coat pocket. Lily's favorite, nothing. She wouldn't look at him, wouldn't look at anyone. Carla came back with a different staff member, a younger guy named Reed. They whispered near the hallway, but not quietly enough. Jake heard enough to know what they were thinking. Abduction, trauma, maybe abuse, and then police. "You sure she didn't say anything?" Carla asked, walking back toward Jake. "Not a word," he said. "Won't even nod yes or no." "No ID, no tags in her clothes, nothing," Carla muttered. "Could be a runaway. Or worse, someone dumped her. That happens more than people think." Jake didn't know what to say to that. The idea that someone could just leave a child, discard her like trash, made his jaw clench. Reed returned with a phone in his hand. "They're sending someone from missing persons. Said there's been chatter about an Amber Alert, but nothing official yet." Jake sat back, something sharp twisting in his gut. "You think she's one of those?" Carla looked at the girl and sighed. "She's definitely someone's, and someone's out there losing their damn mind right now." The girl flinched at the word, damn. Jake caught it, a twitch of her eyes. He leaned forward. "Hey," he said, voice low and calm. "You don't have to talk, not yet. But you're safe now, okay? You're inside. No one's going to hurt you here." The girl's eyes lifted for just a second, met his, and then dropped again. It was like staring into a locked door, but behind it there was something. Fear, maybe more. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Jake looked at Carla. "What happens when the cops get here?" Carla hesitated. "That depends." "On what?" "On who she is." Jake stood near the vending machine in the shelter's break room, staring at the rows of stale chips and off-brand candy bars like they held the answers to his problems. His clothes were still damp, and his socks squished in his boots every time he shifted his weight. The low hum of fluorescent lights buzzed in his ears. He'd just sat down in one of the plastic chairs, head in his hands, when a woman cleared her throat behind him. He turned. A tall woman in a maroon cardigan and wire-frame glasses stood in the doorway, arms folded across her chest. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, but her expression was sharp. Not unkind, but alert. She stepped in and closed the door behind her. "You're the man who brought the girl in?" Jake nodded. "Yeah, found her by the gas station on 8th. "I'm Teresa. I run this place." He stood out of habit, still uncomfortable in places like this. Jake Mercer." Teresa looked him up and down, not judgmentally, but like she was doing math in her head. "You did a good thing," she said, "but I want you to understand something." Jake frowned. "Okay. This isn't over. When you involve the police, especially with a child that doesn't speak, with no ID, you're stepping into something you can't control. You're part of the story now, whether you meant to be or not." "I just found her," Jake said. "That's it." Teresa shook her head. "Doesn't matter. If she's connected to something big, and you're the one who brought her in, they'll look at you. They'll dig into your life, your history, everything. You have a kid, right?" His chest tightened. "Yeah, Lily." "Then be careful, Jake. These things get messy, fast. People think doing the right thing always leads to the right outcome, but sometimes The right thing turns your whole life inside out. He didn't say anything, because he knew she wasn't wrong. She stepped toward the door, then paused. "We'll help the girl. But you, keep your head down. You don't want to be in the middle of this if it blows up." Then she walked out, leaving Jake alone with the buzzing lights and the quiet sense that his night had just crossed a line it couldn't uncross. The sound of tires screeching and doors slamming shattered the quiet like a brick through glass. Jake looked up from the hallway just in time to see blue and red lights explode through the front windows of the shelter, washing the walls in a dizzying pulse. Carla rushed past him, eyes wide, muttering, "They're here already?" Jake stepped back as 2 uniformed officers burst through the front door, followed by 3 more in plain clothes. Then came the suits, FBI, no question. The kind of men who looked like they hadn't smiled since 2003. One of them, a tall man with gray at his temples and a badge clipped to his belt, took charge like the air in the room belonged to him. "Where is she?" he snapped. Carla pointed toward the common room without saying a word. The agents moved fast, not panicked, but with a purpose that made Jake's skin crawl. He watched as they swept in, surrounding the little girl, who sat frozen on the couch where she'd been given dry clothes and a cup of cocoa she never touched. She didn't cry, she didn't move. Jake stepped forward, instincts flaring. "Hey, take it easy, all right? She's scared out of her mind." The lead agent turned to him. "You Jake Mercer?" His voice was sharp, clipped. Jake nodded slowly. "You brought her in?" "Yeah, found her outside. She was alone." Another agent was already scribbling on a notepad. A third was taking pictures of the room. The lead agent's radio crackled to life. Jake caught one word through the static. "Match." Then another voice, clearer, urgent. "It's her." Jake's pulse skipped. The agent looked at him again, this time with a different kind of stare. Calculating. "Mr. Mercer," he said, suddenly formal, "you need to come with us." Jake stiffened. "What? Why? I told you. I found her." "That's it." The agent didn't blink. "You found the missing daughter of Charles Astor. That makes you part of an active investigation. You'll want a lawyer." Jake felt the ground shift under his feet. The room spun. Carla looked stunned. Reed had backed into the hallway like he wanted nothing to do with any of it. The girl still didn't speak. She just stared at Jake. And for the first time, something in her eyes looked like recognition. Jake sat in the cold, windowless room with fluorescent lights that buzzed just enough to make his head throb. Across from him, an agent, this one younger, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that looked like it belonged to someone else, flipped through a thick folder. Every so often, he glanced up at Jake like he was waiting for a confession that hadn't even been asked for yet. Jake's knee bounced under the table. He hated this kind of silence, the kind that felt like a setup. The door creaked open. The first agent, the one with the gray in his hair, walked in, holding a tablet in one hand and a still-wet umbrella in the other. Rain dripped onto the linoleum as he shut the door behind him. Jake sat up straighter. "Am I under arrest?" The agent didn't answer right away. He tapped the tablet, turned it around, and slid it across the table. On the screen was a photograph, a professionally shot image, a girl with auburn hair, eyes a little too large for her face, smiling beneath a halo of warm sunlight. Her name was printed in bold letters beneath the picture, Emily Grace Astor, age 6, missing 17 days. Jake looked at the picture, then back at the agent. "No," he said quietly. "That can't be her." "It is," the agent replied. "Facial recognition confirmed it. Prints match. DNA will take longer, but we won't need it." Jake leaned back in his chair like he'd been hit in the chest. The girl from the street, the one who hadn't spoken a word, the one clinging to the blanket like it was the last safe thing on earth. "She didn't say anything," Jake murmured. "She didn't tell me who she was." "She wouldn't have," the younger agent said. "This wasn't just a disappearance. It was a kidnapping. Someone took her, someone held her, and someone left her in that street." Jake's stomach turned to ice. The older agent leaned in. And until we figure out who that someone is, we're going to keep asking why it was you who found her." Jake looked down at the screen again, at that innocent smile. He was already in it, way deeper than he could afford to be. The street outside Jake's apartment was unrecognizable. Yellow tape blocked off the stairwell, flashing red and blue lights bathed the brick walls in chaos, and news vans lined the curb like vultures circling fresh meat. A crowd had gathered, neighbors, onlookers, people holding phones up like torches, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man in the middle of the storm. Jake stood on the curb, surrounded by officers and agents, his name already being shouted from behind camera lenses. His hoodie was soaked, his face pale. Lily wasn't with him, thank God. The shelter had offered to keep her for the night. But now he was alone, and every eye on the block was locked on him. There he is. "Jake Mercer, are you a hero, or are you hiding something? What was a billionaire's daughter doing with a broke dock worker?" He wanted to scream, to yell that he didn't know, that he hadn't asked for any of this. But even that felt like a trap now. Every word could be twisted, every breath recorded. So he kept walking, jaw tight, fists clenched. A reporter shoved a mic toward his face. "Did you know who she was when you found her?" Jake didn't answer. A flashbulb popped inches from his eyes. Another reporter, this one with slicked hair and a rehearsed expression, raised his voice for the cameras. "Jake Mercer, 32, single father, unemployed, currently behind on rent. Tonight, he's either being hailed as a good Samaritan or looked at as a man who might know more than he's telling." Jake froze. That last part wasn't just commentary, it was bait. The kind that could ruin him, that could cost him Lily. He looked at the cops, at the agents standing behind them like stone statues. None of them stopped the circus. None of them corrected the headlines. His landlord stood near the door, arms crossed, a smirk just barely hidden. Jake didn't need to guess what was coming next. The eviction notice hadn't expired yet, but now it didn't have to. Publicity like this? It was a gift to a man looking for an excuse to clear out a broke tenant. Jake stepped through the door, heart pounding, cameras flashing behind him like lightning. And all he could think was, how fast can everything fall apart? Jake sat in the principal's office, hands clenched so tight in his lap that his knuckles had gone white. Across from him, Mrs. Feldman, the assistant principal, folded her hands neatly on the desk. Her tone was gentle, but practiced, like she'd delivered this exact conversation a dozen times before breakfast. "Jake, I know this is a lot, but we have to talk about what happened today." He didn't respond at first, just stared past her at the window, where the clouds outside were low and heavy, pressing down on the city like a threat. His leg bounced. His throat felt tight. Mrs. Feldman cleared her throat and tried again. "Lily was cornered in the cafeteria this morning. 3 boys, 5th graders. They started asking her if her dad stole a rich girl, called her kidnapper's daughter. One of them pushed her down." Jake blinked. Slowly, then, finally, met her eyes. "Did anyone stop it?" "The lunch staff intervened, but the damage was done." He stood up too fast. The chair scraped loudly across the floor. "I'm pulling her. She's not going back there." Mrs. Feldman raised a hand. "Jake, please sit. There's more." He sat, but barely. Every muscle in his body was lit like a fuse. She slid a paper across the desk. "We've received a formal inquiry from Child Protective Services. Given the media attention, the rumors, and your current housing situation, they're reviewing your custody arrangement." For a second, the room spun. "They're what?" "They haven't made any decisions yet," she said quickly. "But someone filed a report anonymously. That's all we know for now." Jake pushed back from the desk, standing again, chest heaving. "I found a lost kid. I did the right thing. And now my daughter's getting shoved around in school and I'm being looked at like I'm a threat to her?" "I know it's unfair," she said softly. "But this is how these things go. The more attention something gets, the more questions people ask." Jake turned without another word, storming out of the office and down the hallway. Every step echoed with rage and fear. He'd done nothing wrong, but that didn't matter, because now the system had its eyes on him, and they were watching everything. Jake had barely closed the gate to the shelter parking lot when the black SUV screeched to a stop in front of him. The door flew open before the engine even died. A man stepped out, tall, polished, shoulders squared like he was carved from glass and money. Charles Astor. Jake recognized him instantly. He'd seen that face plastered on every TV screen and tablet for days. Founder of Astor Tech, net worth in the billions, grieving father of a missing child. And now apparently coming straight for him. "You're Jake Mercer?" Astor's voice was sharp, unfiltered. Jake stiffened. "Yeah, who's asking?" Astor moved in close, every inch of him radiating power, rage barely hidden beneath the surface. His jaw was clenched, eyes bloodshot, not from lack of sleep, Jake guessed, but from fury. "You found my daughter," Astor said, "or so you say." Jake blinked. "I did find her. She was alone. I brought her here." Astor scoffed. "Alone, in the rain, in your neighborhood, and you just happened to stumble on her?" He took another step forward. "You think I believe that? You think any sane man would?" Jake held his ground. "I didn't take your kid. I didn't know who she was." "But you kept her. You didn't call the police. You walked her into a shelter like you were some damn hero. And now the whole world thinks you saved her. You know what that makes you? Convenient." Jake's fists clenched at his sides. "I did what anyone should have done. She was scared. She wasn't talking. I brought her somewhere safe." Astor's eyes narrowed. "Or maybe you were waiting for something. A ransom, maybe? A reward? Or did someone pay you to keep her quiet?" Jake felt the heat rise in his face. "You've got no idea what I've been through. I didn't ask for this. I don't care about your money." "No," Astor said, stepping back. "You care about something else. And whatever it is, I'll find it. And when I do, I'll make damn sure you regret dragging my daughter into it." He turned, got back in the SUV, and the door slammed shut. Jake stood frozen as the engine roared away, the echo of the confrontation ringing louder than the rain. Jake sat alone in the interrogation room, the walls closing in like a vice. The overhead light flickered, humming with that same low, maddening buzz he was starting to associate with every government building he'd been in lately. His hands were folded on the metal table, his fingers raw from gripping each other too tight. The door opened with a sharp click, and the two agents walked in. Agent Dorsey, the younger one with the smug edge, and Agent Rivas, the older one with the steel gaze that seemed to cut through skin. Neither smiled, neither sat. Rivas tossed a manila folder onto the table with a flat slap that made Jake jump. "Jake Mercer," Rivas began, tone unreadable, "unemployed, single father, prior incident 2 years ago, bar fight. And now you just happen to find the missing daughter of the wealthiest man in the state, 2 blocks from your apartment?" Jake exhaled slowly. "I already told you everything. I didn't know who she was. I just saw a scared kid in the rain." Dorsey paced behind him like a shark that smelled blood. "You didn't call the police. You walked her into a shelter and left your name at the desk. Why not call 911 right then and there?" "I thought she might have been a runaway," Jake said, voice tight, "or abused. I figured the shelter knew what to do." "You figured?" Dorsey repeated. "Because that doesn't sound like someone thinking clearly. That sounds like someone trying to control a narrative." Jake slammed his fist on the table before he could stop himself. "I'm not controlling anything. I did what I thought was right." There was a silence after that, tense, long enough to make Jake regret raising his voice. Rivas sat down, opened the folder, and slid out a photo. It was of Jake walking down the street that night, the little girl wrapped in his hoodie, her face turned away from the camera. "You were being followed," Rivas said. "Did you know that?" Jake's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "We found the footage. Someone was trailing you both. So either you're being framed or you're part of it. And we're going to figure out which one it is." Jake swallowed hard. His mouth was dry, and for the first time, he realized they didn't believe him. Not fully. Maybe not at all. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Jake sat on the edge of the cot in the corner, elbows on his knees, watching the little girl across from him. She was curled up in the oversized armchair, knees tucked to her chest, eyes fixed on a tear in the carpet. Emily. That was her name. He'd heard it 100 times over the last 3 days, from the agents, the press, the missing posters they kept showing him, like he'd forgotten who she was. But she hadn't said a word. Not to them, not to anyone. Not until now. Jake rubbed a hand over his jaw. He was so tired it hurt to blink. "You want water? I think they've got juice, too." Emily didn't respond. He sighed and leaned back, trying not to push. She'd been through more than he could imagine, and every time someone tried to ask her questions, she shrank deeper into herself. He'd seen it, how she folded her body small, like she was trying to disappear. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the way she'd followed him with her eyes when he came in. Or maybe it was just time. "I've got a daughter," he said, voice low. "Her name's Lily. She's 6. She likes pancakes, and she hates loud movies. She asked me if Santa could come even if we don't have a chimney." Emily blinked. Her gaze shifted toward him. Jake smiled a little. "I told her Santa knows how to use Windows. She thought that was hilarious." Silence again. Then, so soft he almost missed it. "I don't like Santa." Jake froze. His heart tripped over itself. "No?" She shook her head slowly. "He came to the house last Christmas, but he wasn't real. He was wearing a suit, and he smelled like smoke." Jake sat up straighter, every nerve in his body alert. "Emily, who was he?" Her lips trembled. "He said not to tell. He said if I told, my daddy would never find me." Jake swallowed. "But I'm here now, and I promise no one's going to hurt you again." She looked up at him, really looked, and something inside her shifted. Her voice cracked. "I was so scared," she whispered. Jake nodded, voice thick. "I know, kiddo, I know." The wind outside howled against the windows like it was trying to get in. Jake sat across from Emily again, this time closer, crouched low, so his eyes were level with hers. She was curled in the same chair, blanket wrapped tight around her, but her face had changed. It wasn't blank anymore. There was something behind her eyes now, something sharper, older than a 6-year-old should ever carry. She looked at him, hesitant, her fingers twitching against the blanket. Jake kept his voice soft, like he was trying not to scare a wild animal. "You said the man in the Santa suit, he wasn't real? Can you tell me more about him?" Emily's lips parted, then closed again. For a moment he thought she was going to shut down, like she had every time someone tried to dig too deep. But then her voice came out, barely louder than a breath. "There were 2 of them. The first one took me from the garden. He had gloves. He didn't say anything, just picked me up and put me in a car." Jake's chest tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I cried a lot. They gave me something to drink. After that I slept, a lot of sleeping." Her voice got smaller. "They moved me to another house, somewhere cold. I couldn't see out the windows. They said I'd go home soon. But I knew they were lying." Jake leaned forward. "Emily, how did you get away?" She looked at him, and this time her voice shook. "They left me alone just one night. He forgot to lock the back door. I waited until I couldn't hear anything. I ran. I didn't know where I was. Just ran until I saw lights and houses." Jake swallowed hard. "You found your way to me." She nodded. Jake didn't know whether to cry or scream. This wasn't just a case of a missing girl. It wasn't some ransom gone wrong or a lucky break. Emily hadn't been found. She'd escaped, on her own, 6 years old. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper now. "Are they going to come back for me?" Jake didn't hesitate. "Not if I can help it." The conference room smelled like stale coffee and stress. A flat-screen monitor sat mounted on the wall, paused on a grainy frame of security footage. Jake stood behind Agent Rivas, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Dorsey hovered near the laptop, fingers twitching like he couldn't decide if he wanted to hit play or not. "You said you walked past the old gas station around 8:42 p.m. Rivas said without looking at Jake. That right? Yeah, Jake muttered. That's when I saw her. Rivas nodded, then gave a subtle nod to Dorsey. The footage began to play. The timestamp in the corner blinked. 8:41:17. Rain streaked the screen, blurring the shapes, but Jake's silhouette was clear enough, walking fast, shoulders hunched, heading east. Then came the girl, small, hunched over, seated near the edge of the curb like a forgotten doll. The camera caught the moment he paused, turned back, hesitated, then walked to her. The room was dead silent as the screen showed Jake kneeling, pulling off his hoodie, wrapping it around the girl, lifting her, cradling her like she might break. Clear as day, Dorsey said. You didn't know who she was. You didn't force anything. You helped. Jake exhaled, but there was no relief in it. So that's it. I'm not a suspect. Rivas didn't answer right away. He hit pause on the footage, then tapped the space bar again. Keep watching. The screen stayed on that shot for another minute. Then a figure appeared, off in the corner, just a blur under the overhang of the gas station. The shape didn't move, just stood there, watching. The camera wasn't clear enough to show a face, but the outline was unmistakable. Tall, still, waiting. Dorsey stepped closer to the screen. This guy never approaches, doesn't follow, just watches them go. Jake stared at the figure. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He was watching us? Rivas nodded slowly, and he knew exactly where to stand to avoid being seen. Whoever he is, he didn't just stumble across that scene. He was placed there. Jake's voice came out hoarse. You think he was one of the people who took her? We think, Rivas said, locking eyes with him, that whatever this is, it's not over. Emily sat cross-legged on the shelter bed, twisting the hem of her shirt between her fingers, her eyes fixed on the wall like it held something only she could see. Jake sat beside her, not too close, letting the silence stretch until she chose to fill it. When she finally spoke, her voice was dry but clear. There was a man in the house, not the one who took me. Jake turned to her slowly, his chest tightening. Another man? She nodded just once. Her fingers kept twisting the fabric. The one who took me. He didn't talk. He kept the lights off. He gave me food but never looked at me. But the other man, he came later. He didn't wear a mask. Jake's breath caught. Did he hurt you? Emily shook her head. He just watched. Watched? She finally turned toward him, and the way her small face looked in that moment made Jake's stomach knot. There was something too still about her, something hollow. He'd come in when I was supposed to be asleep. I could feel him standing there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He just stood in the doorway. Sometimes he whispered something I couldn't hear. And then he left. Jake's hands clenched in his lap. You saw his face? Only once, when the lights flickered in the hallway. He was wearing a tie, like the kind you wear to a party. Jake fought to keep his voice steady. Can you describe him? She hesitated, then nodded. He had a red mark on his neck, like a scar, and his hair was shiny, combed. He smelled like lemons and smoke. Jake's mind raced. Lemon and smoke, a scar, a tie. That wasn't the profile of a thug or a hired goon. That was someone clean, someone careful, someone close to power. Emily, do you think he knew your daddy? Her face went pale. She looked away. He called me by my full name, not just Emily. He said, Emily Grace Astor, go to sleep now. Jake sat back slowly, heart pounding in his ears. That name, spoken like a lullaby, like a possession. Whoever that man was, he hadn't just been part of this, he knew her. Jake was already having a bad morning when she walked through the door. He was at the shelter again, drinking burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup, trying to keep his head low, while agents and caseworkers buzzed like flies around him. Emily was in a separate room with a trauma specialist. Lily was at school, hopefully having a quieter day than the last. Jake had barely slept. He looked like it, too. The click of heels on the linoleum made him glance up. And there she was. Tara. Same sharp cheekbones, same fire in her eyes, same storm behind her smile. Only now she was dressed in business casual and wearing a visitor badge clipped to her coat. It said CPS, Investigator. Jake stood slowly, blood draining from his face. "Hello, Jake," she said, voice smooth. "Long time." "Tara," he said, forcing the name out of his mouth like a stone. What are you doing here?" "I'm following up on a custody inquiry," she said, holding up a folder that looked suspiciously thin for all the weight it carried. "Your name came across my desk. Imagine my surprise." He swallowed. "You're here about Lily." She smiled without warmth. "I'm here about everything. Your daughter, the missing billionaire's girl, the sudden media attention, and the man with a history of instability who just happened to be at the center of it." Jake flinched. "I haven't done anything wrong." "You walked out on our daughter, Jake," she snapped, dropping the mask for just a second. "You left. You disappeared. And now I'm supposed to believe you're some noble rescuer? Don't expect everyone else to buy that story." "I didn't disappear. You pushed me out and then told the courts I was dangerous." "You made it easy." Jake's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The agents were watching now. Rivas stood across the room, eyes narrowing. Tara leaned in, just close enough for her voice to sting. "You always wanted to be the hero, Jake, but some people don't get to wear capes. Some people just make messes." Then she turned and walked away, heels echoing like gunshots. And with every step Jake felt it, the cracks forming beneath him. His past wasn't just back, it was dragging him under. Jake was leaning against the hallway wall outside the therapist's office when the door creaked open. Carla stepped out first, her face unreadable, but her eyes lingered on him longer than usual. Then came Emily, her tiny frame wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, his hoodie. She looked tired, but there was a steadiness in her walk now, something new in her shoulders, like she'd decided something and wasn't letting it go. She came up to Jake, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "I don't want to go back there." He crouched down. "Back where?" "To my old house, with my dad. I don't want to go back." Jake's heart lurched. "Emily." "I want to stay with you." It hit like a punch to the chest, equal parts awe and panic. Behind them, Carla's breath caught. An agent who'd been loitering down the hall stood a little straighter. Jake didn't know what to say. He wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to. But it wasn't that simple. You barely know me," he managed. Emily didn't flinch. "You saw me." Jake blinked. "What do you mean?" "When I was on the curb," she said, "no one else stopped, just you. You saw me like I was real, not like I was lost or broken." He swallowed hard, forcing the emotion down like broken glass. Carla finally stepped in. "Jake, she told the therapist she felt safe with you. That matters. But you have to understand. Her father's not just a parent. He's a billionaire with lawyers and power and the media on his side. If you don't tread carefully, this doesn't end with you being her guardian. It ends with you in court. Or worse." Jake stood, hands shaking. Emily was still looking up at him, trust written in every line of her face. He looked at Carla. "What happens if I say yes?" "You'll be challenging the Astors, the state, maybe even the FBI." Jake looked down at Emily again, and she took his hand, small fingers curling into his. "I don't care," he said. "If she wants to stay, then she stays." Carla let out a breath. "Then God help you, Jake, because the war's just begun." The man looked like he was carved from stone, broad shoulders, buzz cut, tailored black suit that barely hid the muscle underneath. Nameplate on his chest read, K. Maddox, but everyone knew who he was without needing to ask. Astor's head of private security. Ex-military. Zero nonsense. The kind of guy whose expression never changed, even when a building caught fire. Jake sat across from him at the long conference table, feeling every crack in his own voice as Maddox just stared. Quiet. Impenetrable. Agent Dorsey stood near the door, arms crossed, tapping a pen against his thigh in rhythm. It was supposed to be an informal meeting, just a conversation, but it felt more like an ambush. "So let me ask it again," Jake said, leaning forward. "You were head of security the night Emily disappeared. You were on shift. How does a 6-year-old vanish from under your nose?" Maddox didn't blink. "I wasn't on the estate that night. I was reassigned to oversee a satellite site." Jake scoffed. "Reassigned? Convenient." Dorsey shot Jake a look but didn't interrupt. Jake pressed on. "Emily said someone came into her room. Not the man who took her, someone else. Someone who stood in her doorway, watched her sleep. She described details: scar on the neck, lemon and smoke smell, a tie. Sounds a lot more like someone from inside the house than some street criminal." Maddox's jaw twitched, the first crack in the armor. "I can't comment on the girl's recollections." "You can't, or you won't?" Maddox's eyes turned cold. "I have signed confidentiality agreements. I've been instructed not to speak on internal family matters or employee movements during the investigation." Jake stood, hands on the table. "You're telling me a child was taken and you're worried about contracts?" Maddox didn't move. "My job is to protect the family. That includes their privacy." Jake shook his head, heat crawling up the back of his neck. "If you were really protecting them, she never would have gone missing." He stormed out, heart pounding. Behind him, Maddox didn't follow, didn't say a word, but Jake saw it, in the way the man's hands clenched under the table. He knew something, and he was terrified someone would find out. Emily sat at the table, her small hands moving with surprising precision as she dragged a crayon across the paper. The edges were smudged, but the lines were confident, deliberate. Jake watched from across the room, heart pounding harder with each mark she made. It wasn't a drawing of flowers or animals or some imaginary castle. It was a floor plan, the Astor estate, from memory. She'd asked for crayons and paper after dinner, like it was nothing, like she just felt like coloring. Then she started sketching the house she said she never wanted to return to, room by room, hall by hall. And now, as she neared the edge of the page, her voice came out soft, flat. "There were cameras here, and here." Jake moved closer, crouching beside her. She pointed to a long hallway just outside what looked like her bedroom. They were inside little white balls on the ceiling, one in the hallway, one above the stairs, one hidden in the flower vase in the living room. Jake's jaw tightened. "You're sure?" Emily nodded. "I saw the red lights at night, but Daddy told me they were just smoke alarms." He looked down at the plan again, tracing the route she'd described when she escaped. The back door she slipped through, the window she used to watch the moon. "Did anyone ever mention the cameras to you? Anyone else?" "No," she said. "But sometimes the man in the tie would look at me like he knew when I'd been bad, like he'd already seen it." Jake swallowed hard, feeling the walls of his mind closing in, hidden surveillance inside a child's bedroom. A man she didn't know watching her through the night. A house wired for control. This wasn't just paranoia. This was structure, system, intent. He took a photo of the drawing with his phone, fingers trembling. "Emily, you did good," he said. "Really good." She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are they going to be mad I remembered?" Jake forced a smile, even though his gut twisted. "They're going to be scared, and they should be." Jake sat at the computer in the shelter's staff office, the screen casting a pale glow across his face in the dim room. Carla had given him 10 minutes, maybe 15, while she checked on Lily and Emily. He was supposed to be looking up legal aid, maybe housing options. Instead, he was digging through Charles Astor's past like a man looking for a thread in a wildfire. At first, it was what he expected. Clean headlines, charity galas, smiling photo ops with politicians. The public image was airtight. Grieving father, self-made billionaire, quiet philanthropist. But Jake had learned something over the last week. The truth never lives in the headlines. It hides in the margins. He found a blog post from 3 years ago, buried deep in a forgotten forum, written by a former nanny. No names, no proof. Just a story about security teams that didn't allow the staff to speak directly to Emily, about cameras in every hallway, and a sense that someone was always watching. The post ended abruptly, just stopped mid-sentence. Jake kept searching. A whistleblower's name came up from an old civil case, sealed. The court had ruled in Astor's favor. Of course they had. But the keywords in the legal summary set off alarm bells: privacy breach, internal surveillance, psychological manipulation. It wasn't just a custody issue or a kidnapping. Something darker ran underneath. He clicked through archived interviews and paused on a video of Astor giving a TED-style talk about human data systems. The way he spoke, it wasn't about helping people. It was about control, behavioral tracking, influence at scale. It sounded sterile, scientific, and deeply personal. Jake leaned back, heart racing. Emily had said it. He watched me sleep. And now Jake was starting to believe it hadn't just been one man. It was an entire system built around that girl. A fortress, yes, but a prison too, designed to keep her seen and silent. A knock on the door made him jump. Carla peeked in. "Emily's asking for you." Jake stood, every bone in his body tensed, because now he didn't just suspect that Charles Astor wasn't who he claimed to be. He was starting to believe the man didn't even know what father meant. The gates to the Astor estate stood open that night, not for him, but for the flashbulbs and the valets, for champagne glasses and sharp tuxedos, for handshakes that cost more than Jake had in his savings account. A gala, they called it, charity for something vague and digestible. Behind it all, the press soaked up every inch of Astor's curated perfection. Cameras flashed, music drifted from the garden, and no one noticed the man in a maintenance uniform slip through the side gate. Jake's heart pounded in his ears as he moved along the hedge line. He'd memorized the floor plan Emily had drawn, and now it guided him like a map to buried truths. He hadn't told anyone, not Carla, not Rivas, not even Emily. If he was wrong, this would all blow back on him, but if he was right. He slid through a side door that had been propped open by a careless caterer. The smell inside was exactly how he imagined it. Too clean, like money had sterilized every surface. His boots were silent on the marble floor. He ducked past a hallway, avoiding a server and slipping into the darker wing of the house. Emily's drawing had shown the hallway leading to her old room and the room across from it, marked with a shaky red X. "He came from there," she'd said. Jake stepped inside that room now. It looked like an office, but the air was wrong, too cold. He flicked on a small lamp and scanned the walls. Clean. Too clean. But then he saw it, behind the painting. A panel. He pressed it. It clicked. Inside the compartment was a screen, still powered, a security interface, and below it a row of small labeled drives, dates etched in neat handwriting. Every date matched the nights Emily had mentioned in therapy. Jake pulled one from the slot, heart racing. He didn't know what was on it, didn't need to. The fact it existed was enough. Voices rose in the hallway. He killed the light and slipped out the back. The gala was still going strong, the Astors shaking hands with senators. And Jake? He had just stolen their secret. Jake knew something was wrong the moment he stepped through the shelter's door. The lobby was too quiet. No usual hum of voices. No Carla behind the desk. Just a strange kind of stillness that made his stomach knot. He scanned the room, heart already thudding. No sign of Lily. No sign of Emily. No sign of anyone. Then Carla came rushing around the corner, her face pale, eyes wide with something close to panic. "Where is she?" Jake asked immediately, already pushing past her. "Jake? Wait. Where's Lily?" "She's gone." The words hit like a car crash. He stopped cold, barely able to breathe. "What do you mean, gone?" Carla grabbed his arm. "She was in the playroom with one of the new volunteers. I stepped out for 2 minutes. When I came back, empty." Jake shook his head, trying to process. No, she wouldn't just leave, not without telling me. "I know that," Carla said. "That's why I called the police already, but there's something else." She handed him an envelope. No name, no markings, just cream-colored paper folded once. Jake tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a note, typed, no signature. "Return what you took, or we take what matters most to you." His vision blurred, rage flooding every corner of his body. "They have her," he said, voice barely more than a whisper. "They took my daughter." Carla covered her mouth. Jake turned in a slow circle, the shelter spinning around him. He felt the walls closing in, the noise from the street outside muffled by the roar in his ears. Whoever had taken Emily, they weren't finished. They were watching, and now they'd gone for the one thing Jake couldn't live without. Lily. She was 6 years old, sweet, soft-spoken. She still asked if the moon followed her at night. She was Jake's whole world, and now she was gone. Jake crushed the note in his fist. This wasn't a warning. It was war. The road was nothing but dirt and broken asphalt, the kind of place you wouldn't find unless you were looking for something no one wanted you to see. Jake's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white, eyes locked on the GPS signal, blinking weakly on the burner phone Carla had slipped him. No address, just coordinates and a message from an encrypted number. "She's here. You have one chance." Emily sat in the passenger seat, legs pulled up, face pale and focused. She hadn't said much since they left the city, but she clutched the USB drive tight in her small hands. The footage. The one Jake had pulled from Astor's hidden office. The one that proved everything. "You sure this is the place?" Jake asked, voice low, eyes flicking toward her. Emily nodded once. "This is where they took me first, before the house. I remember the smell." Jake didn't ask what smell. He didn't want to know. The warehouse loomed ahead, rusted and silent, surrounded by scrub grass and broken fencing. No lights, no guards, just shadow. He killed the engine 100 yards out and stepped into the cold. Emily followed, silent as a ghost. Every step crunched gravel underfoot, and Jake's breath fogged the air as they approached the side entrance. A padlock dangled from the door, already broken. "Someone's been here," he whispered. Emily stayed close behind him as they slipped inside. The warehouse was huge, hollow, and dead quiet. Moonlight spilled through shattered windows, painting pale shapes across the floor. In the far corner, a single light bulb glowed. A generator hummed nearby. Jake raised the flashlight in his hand, sweeping the beam across crates, shelves, plastic tarps. Then he saw it. A small shoe, pink, Velcro straps, lilies. Jake's breath caught. "She's here." From somewhere deeper in the dark, a voice echoed out, flat, mechanical, distorted through a speaker. "You brought the girl. Good. Let's finish this." Jake grabbed Emily's hand. No more running, no more hiding. He was getting his daughter back, whatever it took. The voice that greeted them from the shadows wasn't Astor's. It didn't have the sharp arrogance or calculated calm Jake had come to expect from the billionaire. This voice was colder, slicker, a snake wrapped in silk. Jake stood frozen in the center of the warehouse, Lily cradled against his chest, her small arms wrapped tight around his neck. She was safe, shaken, but alive. He'd found her locked in a back room alone, a single camera watching her like prey. Emily stood just behind him, her hand clenched in the fabric of his jacket. From the darkness, a man stepped forward. The overhead light caught his face. Not Charles. Victor Astor? The younger brother. The one always in the background. Quiet, dutiful, clean-cut. The CFO. The man behind the curtain of Charles's empire. Jake had seen him once at the press conference, standing stiffly behind his brother like he barely existed. Now he looked alive, almost excited. "I didn't think you'd actually make it," Victor said, smoothing the sleeves of his coat. "But I suppose desperation is a powerful motivator." Jake stepped back, body shielding the girls. "You were behind this." Victor tilted his head. "Of course I was. Do you really think a tech giant like Charles Astor could be dismantled from the outside? No, It had to come from someone close, someone who knew the blind spots, the camera loops, the guards who could be bought. Jake's stomach turned. She's your niece. Victor's smile vanished. She's a liability. Charles was never going to hand anything to me, not while she was in the picture. She's the crown jewel, the future of the company. And after what I orchestrated, the board would have no choice but to put the pieces in my hands. Emily flinched, stepping closer to Jake. You staged her kidnapping, Jake said, then planned to find her when it was safe, make yourself the hero. Victor's eyes glittered. It would have worked if she hadn't run, if you hadn't stuck your nose where it didn't belong. Jake tightened his grip on Lily. Victor took a step forward, and Jake realized something. This wasn't just about greed. It was obsession, control. Victor hadn't just wanted the empire. He wanted to erase everything standing in his way, even family. Jake ran. Lily clung to his chest, arms locked around his neck, face buried in his shoulder. Her tiny heart pounded against his, a frantic rhythm that pushed him faster through the dark maze of crates and scaffolding. Behind them, Victor's voice echoed through the warehouse, no longer calm, shouting, unhinged. Don't make this worse, Jake. You don't know what you're doing. But Jake did know. He knew Victor had orchestrated the whole thing, used his own niece as leverage in a sick corporate game. And now he was going to bury the truth if Jake didn't make it out alive. Emily kept pace beside him, barefoot, silent, focused. She didn't cry, she didn't panic, she just moved, gripping the flash drive with the surveillance footage like it was a lifeline. She had memorized every hallway, every blind spot, every locked room. He has a car out back, she whispered. He always had an exit plan. Jake nodded. His legs burned, lungs screamed, but he didn't stop. Not with Lily in his arms, not with the proof in Emily's hands, and not while Victor was still behind them. They reached the service door just as headlights swept across the far wall, Victor's SUV, engine already running, a hired driver waiting. Jake kicked the door open and stumbled out into the gravel. The cold night slapped him in the face. He saw the figure in the driver's seat reach for something. Gun? No time to think. Jake ducked behind a rusted dumpster and slid Lily to the ground, shielding her with his body. Stay down. Don't move. He looked at Emily. Can you run? She nodded, fierce, braver than most grown men. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out the burner phone. 2 taps, 1 button. The live upload link sent the footage straight to a secure drop, one Rivas had given him in secret, just in case. It was done. Behind him, tires squealed. The SUV roared to life. Victor was running. Jake sprinted forward. No plan, just rage. Because it wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore, it was about ending this. Before Victor disappeared again, before he took another child, before the system swallowed it all. The live stream started with static, just a flicker of white noise and a high-pitched hum, barely noticeable at first. Then the screen cut to black. Across news stations, social media feeds, and every tablet in the Aster Tech headquarters, a video blinked to life. A still image appeared, the Aster family crest. Then a voice, calm, female, robotic. The following footage was taken from a private surveillance system inside the Aster estate. This broadcast is unauthorized. Do not adjust your screen. Jake stood in the shelter's hallway, breath caught in his throat, Lily clinging to his leg, Emily beside him holding tight to his hand. Carla muted the phone in her hand and stared at the shelter's tiny break-room TV where the feed had hijacked the local news broadcast. Then it started. Video, grainy, time-stamped, played across the screen, a hallway, a child's bedroom door. Victor Aster standing in the doorway, his silhouette outlined in light. He didn't know the camera was on him. He leaned into the room, speaking in a voice too low to hear. Then he stepped back and looked directly into the lens. Not a glance, a look, like he knew. The footage jumped to another angle, Victor handing off a duffel bag to an unidentified man in the garden in the middle of the night. Money instructions. A single sentence was captured by a directional mic. Make it look clean. We need sympathy." Gasps filled newsrooms across the country. Then came audio logs, clipped but damning, Victor discussing contingencies, board leverage, media angles. A final clip showed him on a secure call with a shadowed figure. "If she dies out there, the narrative shifts. We mourn, then we rebuild." Silence fell. The screen faded to black, and one last message appeared in white letters. "The truth is no longer yours to bury." The feed cut. Phones started ringing. The internet exploded. And at the Astor Mansion, Charles stood frozen in his study as his empire cracked under his feet. Jake looked at Emily. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just watched the screen, her hand still gripping his. She had her voice back now. And so did the truth. The courthouse steps were slick from a morning rain, but the sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting everything in a kind of surreal light. Jake stood at the bottom of the steps, watching the crowd thin out, reporters peeling away, camera crews packing up, the last wave of agents retreating into black SUVs. He wasn't the story anymore, not the suspect, not the cautionary tale, just the guy who got dragged into something huge and made it out the other side. Officially cleared, no charges, no custody threats, no more agents watching his every move. Carla came down the steps with a grin. "You're a free man, Mr. Mercer." Jake smirked, shaking his head. Feels weird hearing that out loud. She handed him a folder. "Family Services wants to talk to you about something else, though. They saw the footage, how you handled Emily, how she trusted you. They're impressed. A nonprofit's looking for community advocates, people who've lived it. They want to offer you a job." Jake blinked. "Me? Working for the system?" "Maybe helping fix it," she said. "One story at a time." He laughed, quiet and disbelieving. "I'll think about it." From across the lot, Lily came running, arms out, her hair bouncing in the wind. Jake dropped to one knee just in time to catch her. She squealed with joy, face buried in his neck. Then Emily walked over, quiet as always, but something different in her eyes now. Peace, safety. She held a small stuffed dog in her arms, the one Lily had given her at the shelter. Her social worker waited by the car behind her. Emily was going back to her mother's side of the family, an aunt in Oregon, someone trustworthy. It was good. It was safe. Still, Jake's chest ached. Emily stopped in front of him and Lily. "Do you have to stay here?" she asked Lily. Lily shook her head. "We can call. Dad said you can visit." Emily's eyes flicked to Jake. "Dad?" Jake froze. Then she stepped forward and hugged him, tight, full of all the words she still didn't know how to say. "Bye, Dad," she whispered. Jake closed his eyes, swallowing the lump in his throat as he held both girls close. New beginnings didn't always come clean, but this one felt real.